All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Douglas Show. Please make sure that you like and subscribe, hit the notifications so you never miss an episode. The season is over, but that doesn't mean that we won't continue looking back and taking a little ahead. To do that, two of my favorites are on the show today. Nick Ackridge covers the team for Pro Football Focus. Ethan Cutto does the same for NBC Sports Washington. Fellas, thanks for hopping on today.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me on.
Nick, anything you'd like to say to me right now before we get started on
the nothing that really rings a bell.
No, nothing at all, my SEC East brethren.
Nope, nothing. Okay. Can't think of anything. All I'm thinking is that Tennessee would have done the same thing to TCU if given the chance, but
they were outclassed in that 3-3-5 was never going to work. Maybe it works over there, but when you play big ball, that I was stunned that they never moved off that. Maybe they don't have the personnel to do it.
No, I mean you play it the whole year. It's tough to kind of switch it at the last game.
It is. It was going to be rough, and look, the schedule looks good for a Georgia three-peat, which I'm sure makes you very happy.
No, not at all.
All right. Even Maryland, what is you a fan of what Loxley's got going on there? He feels like he's heading in the right direction, though.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's been a breath of fresh air to a program that badly needed it at the time. They still haven't gotten a signature win under him. It seems like they beat up on the opponents lesser than them, but when it comes time to play Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, they just can't seem to get it done. I mean, they had a couple of chances against Ohio State, including this year, and then Michigan, they played them really tough this year, but just couldn't close. So I do like what I've seen from Locks, but I'm hoping in 2023 we can get a signature win under his belt.
All right, let's get to a little bit of Commanders. Nick, if you had to sum up this season in one word, what would you use?
Meh. Just I mean, I don't know. It's kind of what I thought it was going to be. It was just going to be kind of hovering around 500, get some – it's been a typical kind of Rivera year, start off slow, get a nice win streak going, but just couldn't finish it at the end. It's just – just kind of another year you're just kind of hovering in the middle, which I've always said is really kind of the worst place to be.
Ethan, he brought up the slow starts. I ask around to lots of guests that come on the show trying to figure this thing out. It's not just a Commanders problem. It's a Rivera problem all the way back to Carolina. Do you have any idea? Do you have your finger on why it takes his team so long to get going?
This might be a little bit out of the box, but one thing I want to point out after being there every day at training camp is this team doesn't really practice in pads a whole lot. It's a lot of shells, just shirts, shorts, helmets. I mean, during the season, especially towards the end, I fully understand that guys are beat up, they're nursing injuries. But even in training camp, I remember after the second preseason game, I was shocked when they spent a whole week of practice, didn't wear anything besides shells. So I think the lack of physicality they practice with during training camp definitely contributes. I'm not asking them to do old-fashioned two-a-days and Oklahoma drills or anything like that, but I would like to see a little bit more of actual physical football being played in July and August. And one thing I think could help a lot, which Ron Rivera mentioned yesterday, was the idea of a joint practice. They haven't done that at all in his tenure. I think it would be largely beneficial if they spent a few extra days going up against an opponent before a preseason game. That's when your first and second team can really get a lot of live reps against the other team's first and second team. It's not a game-like setting, but in the preseason, you're holding a lot back. I don't think there's a lot to take from preseason games in general. So I think a joint practice could go a long way to not starting 1-3, 1-4, like we've grown accustomed to under Rivera.
I've been begging for the joint practices. There was the thing with Richmond, though, right? Wasn't there a deal with Richmond where they weren't allowed to do the joint practices or have somebody? I forget how that works, but it felt like there was a contingency there or some reason that was holding them up.
I think in 2021, they just had to be down there for a week, which when you're having training camp in two different places, it makes it a little bit harder. But this year they were in Ashburn the entire time. So I'm not really one to make excuses. So I say there's no excuse they didn't bring at least someone down.
Scott Turner is out, Nick. I know you're happy with that move. What are you looking for in his replacement? Which I guess Darren Hayes said today that Ron would not be promoting within. I didn't hear him say that they wouldn't be going out and finding an old Rivera crony, just that they wouldn't promote from within. What are you looking for, assuming that it doesn't have to be somebody you already knows? What would you be looking for in the new offensive coordinator?
Yeah, I don't know if I was really happy he was gone. I understood why he had to go just because of what's kind of transpired over these past couple weeks. I've always been a Turner fan more so than the rest of the fan base. I tweeted it out. I knew I was gonna get killed for it by the fans, but I think he's the scapegoat. I don't think it's on him. I think you'll see him get picked up by another team and be kind of successful. I mean, I know fans hate that. They just want the OC gone if you're, bottom 10 offense every single year, but 8 quarterbacks, it's just constant changing of offensive line. It's tough for him. I don't know who you bring in kind of maybe a lame duck year. Like I just don't know I don't think you're going to get a nice young offensive coordinator, an up and coming guy to come in here with, the whole ownership situation and, kind of Rivera on his last limbs, I would say. But I honestly have no idea. I think you should kind of lean into what Howell did well, and that's kind of some of the RPO run base sort of stuff that a little bit of what the Dolphins are doing where they're heavy kind of RPO stuff. You can kind of lean into what the Bears did with Justin Fields. I mean, he's not the runner that Justin Fields is, but he's still a very, very good athlete and good runner. I don't know who is going to want to really come here. I mean, I thought maybe you would hire internally just because Rivera can kind of keep his pulse on and kind of get the guy he wants. So follow his sort of style of game plan, which we saw yesterday. But yeah, I really have no clue what's going to come.
Ethan, were you surprised that he ended up getting fired? I think a lot of people thought that maybe, to Nick's point, if there's only 1 year left, on Rivera's tenure here, why not just run it back one more year and keep the band together? What does it cost or hurt? Were you surprised that they fired him?
No, I think kind of when Sam Fortier's story came out the week before, where a bunch of players were willing to go, at least anonymously on the record, and say they were upset with his play calling. Those type of stories hadn't been coming out the past 3 years. Under Rivera's watch, he really kept the leaks really limited. I think that kind of brought light to some issues that the offense was having within the building. I think there had to be a scapegoat. I agree with Nick. I don't necessarily think Scott Turner is fully at fault. In fact, I think there's a lot of things he couldn't control, specifically the QB carousel and the offensive line rotation that seemed to be never ending. They started so many different units. So I wasn't necessarily surprised. I feel like Scott Turner was just the easiest person to take the fall for the offensive struggles, because let's be real, when you have Jahan Dotson, Terry McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel, Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, you're scoring 18, 19 points a game on average. That's simply not going to cut it. I don't care what your offensive line is, what your quarterback situation is. There's so many different guys that can just get the ball in these players, dynamic players' hands. So I wasn't surprised. I do feel for him. I think a lot of things he was given were out of his control. I think the offensive philosophy he wants to run with that vertical style of passing attack didn't really match up with what Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew apparently want to do, which is run the ball twice the amount they pass, which we can get into later. Not feasible, not in 2022.
Yeah.
But I would say not surprised overall. I agree with Nick also. I have no idea who would want to come take this job. I get it. There's only 32 OC jobs. It could be a springboard to other people or to a potential job down the line, but lame duck year. You don't know who the quarterback's going to be. You don't know what the offensive line is going to look like. I mean, yeah, the skill players, it's a enticing group, but other than that, it doesn't feel like there's a lot to work with. So I think Rivera is going to have maybe a little bit harder of a time finding the guy he wants to replace Turner than he may think.
One last one on Turner. Nick, if we're assigning blame off of a 100% system, and how much blame do you give to the offensive coordinator? How much blame goes to the quarterback situation? And how much blame goes to the offensive line?
I'd say about. I'm trying to think of what would get me killed less on Twitter. I'd say 60% on the quarterback situation. I think it's a fair 20-20 split between the offensive line and Scott Turner. Like Turner has his bad habits. Like there are very bad habits. It's the 2nd and 10 plus runs. He's going to run it every single time at 2nd and 10 plus. That just I hated that with a passion. He runs mesh almost every 3rd down. Mark Bullock brings it up every single time. It's just he has these sort of things, but the fans love to point out, the jet sweeps with Curtis Samuel that don't work, or these sort of gimmick plays on 4th down and stuff like that. But those plays are there. I understand why he's calling them. And if they work, he looks like a genius. It's worked in the past. When you get a jet sweep and it works, you look like a genius. When it doesn't, you look like an idiot. That's just kind of the nature of the offensive coordinator position. But I think a 60 kind of 40 split, 60 for the quarterback. Everything in this league is quarterback. I mean, you're just not going to do anything without one. And I think most of the blame's got to go there.
And Ethan, did I miss one? Should I have included the GM who put together the offensive line and hired, paid the quarterback? Is that the man that needs more of the blame if we're parsing it out?
I don't think it's the GM when it comes to the title in Martin Mayhew. I think it's the actual GM, which is the head coach in Ron Rivera.
Right.
I mean, he's responsible for the personnel at the end of the day, and he's the one who made the decision to trade Trent Williams, as dire of a situation as that was. He's the one that let Brandon Sheriff leave in free agency. He's the one who can't decide if he'll want to put Sam Cosmi at right tackle or right guard and do a rotation between Cosmi and
I've never seen a rotation in the NFL in my life.
Yeah, and Cosmi literally said on Monday, he was like, I can't tell you why that happened. I guess maybe they were trying to figure something out, but I've never seen that happen. And what he also said was the first time he ever played guard in his life was the first time he played guard for the Commanders. So There's just a whole bunch of overarching issues. I would say, I think Rivera, in terms of a coach that gets his guys motivated, I think he's one of the best when it comes to personnel decisions and such like that. I think maybe that's where he should take a step back.
Ethan, do you see any more changes coming to the coaching staff?
I think Scott Turner's the biggest one. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe down the line there are some. Who knows? I think a lot of people can read the tea leaves, and what happens with this ownership situation could end up being a deciding factor with a lot of the other coaches in terms of what they want to do. I don't know if the team plans to block the staff from interviewing from positions elsewhere. I'm not sure on that, but I think the Turner change is definitely going to be the biggest one. I don't anticipate Del Rio going anywhere. I thought he did a pretty decent job this year. And with the position coaches, I don't really think there's anyone I don't think there's anyone like that's a position coach that could be taking an elevated position elsewhere, at least in my opinion.
Let's move on to what's probably one of the biggest offseason stories with quarterback. Nick, did Hal do enough in one game to keep you from swinging big? I think we all agree they'll probably add a piece, but would you be swinging big again this offseason? They've swung big every year since Ron's been here. They've just missed.
Yeah. The ownership situation kind of screws everything. The lame duck possible year that you have with Rivera here. If you want to go big and trade up in the draft and get one of those top guys, you're looking at a guy who's going to come in with possibly with a head coach for 1 year, an offensive coordinator for 1 year, and then he starts all over again. That's just not a good start to your year. You've got Sam Howell, who's now going to go into a second offense to learn. And if that guy's gone after a year, that's 3 offenses in 3 years for a 5th-round rookie. That's not something you really want to put him in. I don't know if there's any free agent quarterbacks out there that are really going to move the needle. People like Derek Carr and Jimmy Garoppolo, but I think if you take Garoppolo out of that 49er system, I think he's just not really going to be as good. I think Derek Carr is interesting, but I think he's not in the Carson Wentz boat because I think he's a better quarterback than Wentz, but he's kind of in that sort of same mental headspace where it's like you don't really know what you're getting from him anymore. They just went out and got a guy, Devontae Adams, and their skill group is pretty impressive as well with Waller and Jacobs and Renfro and stuff, and you saw him have one of his worst years ever. So I don't know if you really trust that. I just don't think there's anything really out there. I think your best chance is you roll with Howell for a second year. If he's absolutely terrible, then you're hopefully drafting high and you can get one of the top quarterbacks next year. I think that's just kind of the only logical solution you really can have from this.
Ethan, in what is way too early to be guessing these kind of things, what do you assume the quarterback room looks like next year?
Well, we know Sam Howell is going to be there for sure. Whether he's the 1 or the 2, not sure yet. I also agree with Nick. I think he needs to at least be in the conversation to be the 1. I don't think there's anyone on the free agent market that should come in the way Carson Wentz did this year, where you're giving him the starting job. You're going out, you're saying, this is our guy. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to bring in someone like Andy Dalton. They're an established veteran where if things go south with Howell, they can turn to him and maybe he can kind of keep the pace a little bit. He actually performed pretty well in New Orleans this year when you look at the more advanced metrics. So someone like that, I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think they're going to bring in anyone unless it is Derek Carr and this regime wants to make one more last push at kind of taking them over the hump. I don't think they're going to bring in anyone who should be the QB1. I think there's going to be some sort of competition with Sam Howell and QBX. I don't know who it's going to be. I don't think they're going to draft someone early just based on reasons we said above, where ownership's in limbo. Why would a future owner want to buy a team where their first round picks are all gone for the next few years? Like, that honestly decreases the value of it as well. So I think their best case scenario is an established veteran that's okay being the backup and kind of helping Howell groom a little bit, because I don't really think you're going to get anything better in terms of who's available and who are realistic options at the same time.
Right. We've been talking, without talking about the ownership change. And free agency starts, I believe, on the 12th. The owners meeting is 2 weeks later. So I think we all kind of feel like this is a lame duck year for Ron. But do you see a way where the new owner comes in and already had everything mentally and behind the scenes in place for new staff, and everybody's out and they do the start over right this year? Is that a possibility, or you think no way?
I don't think so. I think any owner who does come in, first, we don't know if the sale is going to be finalized at the owners meetings. That's kind of like a target date, but I would say there's a decent chance it happens a little bit later. That's also way past the end of the cycle. A lot of the top guys you'd look to replace Rivera with are probably gone at that point or signed with a different team. So I think the best case scenario would be to ride it out with Rivera and see what happens. He's been through an ownership change when he was in Carolina, so it's not like he's going through this the first time too. He kind of knows what to expect, and I think you got to give him a fair shot too. I mean, this roster, a lot of people are coming back. A lot of the key guys are coming back, and yes, they did collapse in December, but they were 8-8-1 and 1 game away from being in the postseason. So if they can maybe get a win or two more next year, they've done a really good job at getting rid of all the outside noise and not letting it distract them already. If they can maybe get to 9-10 wins next year, I think that's feasible depending on what they do this offseason, but I don't think it's out of the ordinary. Like, I don't think this team is just going to stink because of all the ownership change going on. I think there's still some talent on this team, depending on what happens in free agency. I think they could be a little bit better too. So I'm not ready to write off Ron. And if they're going to give him through this offseason now, I think you got to give him through the year at least and then reevaluate after that.
Nick, if they who plays center next year?
I'm praying it's Chase Roulier. Praying he gets back to healthy, because when he's healthy, he's a top 5 center in the NFL, and they've missed him mightily over these past couple of years. I think he's probably the most important guy on that offensive line. I think it's him, and then Leno is a very serviceable tackle. And then after that, I don't know what you're doing with Cosme anymore, like we've already mentioned, but the rest of them are just kind of below average to average guys, and it's not really going to get you anywhere. And you kind of need an overhaul, especially on that interior 3 if Chase Roulier isn't ready.
One lad was trying to pull it and I had forgotten it. I wanted to ask you, we talked about the 8-1 record, but if they had above quarterback play, what do you think that win record could have looked like? I mean, with above average quarterback play, is this a 10-win team?
I would say so. I would say if you have average quarterback play, it is. Taylor Heineke was very, very bad. I understand the win streak. I understand the Heineke fans. I understand all that sort of stuff. But the way you were winning games with scoring 16 points and 17 points and running the ball 3 yards, 4 yards every single time, you're playing with the devil, and we saw it in December. You just can't consistently win like that, because if things go wrong, you get a fumble, you get a penalty, it just ruins the whole drive. It ruins, the next couple of drives if you just keep kind of doing these sort of mistakes. And you need quick strike offenses at times, and the 20-play drives are only going to happen every so often, every couple of weeks if you're lucky. But yeah, no, I think you just need an average quarterback play. Everyone kind of knows, who's followed me knows my Carson Wentz opinions. Was never a huge fan of going after him, never a huge fan of kind of giving him the keys and thinking, this is going to be a playoff team and watch out when they get in the playoffs. But yeah, you need average quarterback play, just average quarterback play.
Ethan, do you think they will, and would you bring Heineke back on, say, like a 3-year deal?
Now that Scott Turner's gone, I think the chances of him coming back are definitely lower. Part of the appeal with Heineke was he's known the system for years. Carolina, Minnesota, he's pretty much gone with Turner throughout that. And the reason they originally brought him in the first place is he already knew the system, and being that quarantine quarterback during the COVID year, he could come in a pinch and run it well. If he has to learn a new offense, which he will because Turner's not here, I don't think the appeal to have him back is as much. I think the fans think he played better than he actually did. I like Heineke a lot. He's probably the coolest dude in that locker room to talk to. I think he's going to get paid by somebody, not anything crazy, but like solid backup money. And if I were giving him any advice, I would tell him, look, you were out of the league 2 years ago. You've earned yourself a second contract since coming back in the league. Highest bidder. That's where I'd go. And I don't think that's going to be Washington. I think that could be another team that's just looking for a solid backup. I think someone like Kansas City would be a great fit, where he could just back up Mahomes and kind of fit in that great little offense they have going there, where I think Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy could make him look good if he had to come in for a few games if Mahomes got hurt. So I don't see a realistic scenario with Heineke coming back, unless he doesn't have any other options. Both parties want him to come back, and he's okay taking that backup role to Sam Howell.
Before we switch over to a little bit of the defense, Nick, you brought with you the top 3 PFF graded offensive players for the season. Who were they?
Yeah, it was first was Brian Robinson, 82.5. Terry was second, 79.9, and then Gibson, 76.3. I know people are going to be yelling at me for Jahan Dotson, but we're grading everything, and they asked him to run block a lot, and it was not pretty at times. That kind of dragged his grade down a bit. And then on defense, it was Montez Sweat, 86.4, Curl, 82.9, and then Jonathan Allen, 80.1. There are not many surprises there. I know people are going to ask for Payne, but we at PFF apparently hate Deron Payne, so he's been kind of lower. And I kind of digged into his numbers a little bit more. He leads interior defensive tackles in missed tackles, and you can kind of see that a lot on film, is when he's disrupting the play in the backfield, he gets back there and he's missing tackles. I would argue that it shouldn't be downgraded as much as we do downgrade it, but that's not something that I can really fix. I think he's still a very, very good defensive tackle.
Nick, it feels like maybe it was 2, maybe it was even 3 years ago that you, me, and Austin Gale sat on this show discussing the way you build defenses or teams, and that defensive tackles weren't it. So we'll use this as a segue. We are now back to Deron Payne 3 years later. Man, he had a hell of a year. I guess the question is, if you could only keep one, are you paying Deron Payne a lot of money, or are you saving it for Montez Sweat?
If you could only choose one, I would say Payne. I've never been a big Sweat guy as well.
Yeah, well,
I know it sounds like I hate the team, but I think Montez Sweat is a very good edge rusher. I don't think he's going to ever really be in that elite tier. It'd be awesome if he could prove me wrong. I think kind of similar to Preston Smith when he was here, went to the Packers, got a big bag, and he's been okay with the Packers. I don't think they're really complaining about it, but I don't think he's ever really been kind of an elite guy. So I would choose Payne over Sweat.
Ethan, do you think they'll pay Payne, or do you think we're looking at more like a franchise tag situation? Because whatever it is, we cannot afford to let Payne walk out of here for a comp pick a year from now.
I think based on reading the tea leaves in the locker room and from Ron Rivera and Martin Mayhew, franchise tag seems like the route it's going to go. I don't think Payne's camp is going to be very pleased with that at all. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of holdout in the summer. They try to work out a long-term deal, maybe a trade. I'm not sure. I think the team is going to do whatever they can to keep him, but I would find it hard to see them shelling out more money to Payne than they just gave John Allen a year and a half ago, which I believe is 18 million roughly per year. Payne could probably get more, around 19 to 20 from a team like Atlanta, Chicago, someone who needs interior defensive line help and has the cap space for it. So it's definitely intriguing. I don't know exactly which way it's going to shake out, but I think the team is preparing if they can't come to a long-term deal to franchise tag him.
Which would put him at the Jonathan Allen number. The franchise
Right.
tag is 18 million. But you're right. I think on the open market, listen, somebody probably gives the kid $22 million. I could see it. And you spread it over 5 years. And the thing about Payne is he was when he was drafted, he was 20. So he's only 25 years old right now. To me, he is still ascending and just figuring it out. Ethan, I'm curious because you are in the locker room. How do you think that the staff feels about Montez Sweat? I thought I had heard rumblings a year ago that maybe he didn't do some of the things they wanted him to do. Am I wrong there?
I haven't gotten that from being there this year. Obviously, last year everything was COVID, Zoom. Still, there people were out there, but no one was in the locker room. This was the first year it was back to open locker room. I think the staff was pretty pleased with him this year. I think he made some strides. Thought he performed really well given the extra attention he got on the left side with Chase not being there for most of the year. I think they're still confident in him. I don't know if they believe he'll be that elite pass rusher like Nick said, but I do think they want to eventually sign him to a multi-year deal, and I think they do have him in the plans for the future. I think they were really pleased with what he showed this year after the whole defensive line kind of struggled last year besides John Allen. And this group as a whole really played well this year, and I think Montez was a big part of that.
I think the folks on Twitter, when I say, I would, if you could only choose one,
right,
is the key there. I think you're right. Montez had a fantastic season, and really the Preston Smith thing is interesting because they're so similar in that way, right? I mean, Montez affected the passer on a regular basis this year, just didn't kind of tally up some of the sack totals that you'd like. It feels like Preston was the exact same way.
Same school too.
Do what now?
Same school too. Mississippi State.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
I didn't think about that. Interesting. Kendall Fuller's only 27. I thought maybe he was the weak link in the secondary. Had a really good, at least back half of the season. How do you think they value Fuller, Ethan?
Oh, they value him a lot, I believe. Obviously, the secondary struggled a little bit when Benjamin St-Juste went down the backstretch of the year, but they were targeting his replacement a lot, whether that was Danny Johnson, who played well at times, or Rashad Wildgoose, or Christian Holmes, whoever was over there. That's who they were picking on. I think Fuller, like you said, had a really good back end of the year. 2 pick sixes is going to make anyone happy. And he's a veteran in their locker room. All the players seem to love him a lot. I think he's going to be here. I think he has 2 years remaining on his deal, and I don't see or I think it's 1 year actually, but I don't think they're going to move on from him or anything like that.
Nick, if we agree that the offensive line is the biggest need, is corner the second biggest need? And if not, what is the next biggest need on this team?
I think you can never have too many corners. I think if you keep drafting corners, it's never a bad thing to have. St-Juste was kind of up and down, so I think you do kind of need somebody to maybe take that spot. I'm a huge Kendall Fuller fan. I think he's severely underrated. And you just kind of saw this whole defense when they're kind of all healthy. It really works out well when those 4 guys in the secondary are there, and they're all young. Like you said, Fuller's the oldest guy, and if you have Curl and Forrest and St-Juste kind of locked down for a little bit, I think it's a really good starting crew. But we haven't really seen St. Juice kind of finish a season. So that's a lot of faith you're putting into him. And so if there's a top cornerback on the board at 16, or if you have somebody in the second round, I think you have to pull the trigger. I think it's definitely up there as one of the big needs. I think just depth overall is a huge need. So you're not, picking guys up like Rashad Wildgoose in December and having him start key games in a playoff push, and you don't have, John Bostic coming back and David Mayo playing when you need to win games to get into the playoffs. You need solid depth guys, and I've been preaching that for years now, and they just kind of haven't really seemed to do that. So just more depth is never a problem.
Ethan, do you think they'll bring back Holcomb?
That's tough because I think they were really pleased with the way Jamin Davis grew and developed, especially after Holcomb went down. He really seemed to take strides, making those defensive calls and playing that position where at the beginning of the year he wasn't even expected to be in that role. So I'm not sure what Holcomb's free agency market will look like. I think there's definitely a way to get both of them on the field. I know this team likes to play 5 defensive backs a lot. If those are your 2 linebackers with 5 DBs, I think that's pretty solid. I think depth in the back 7 should be a top priority regardless this year. All 3 positions, linebacker, corner, and safety, they need more of. Yes, their starters are decently impressive. A lot of young guys that have made strides, but we saw this year, if one guy goes down, the whole unit kind of struggles even more. So more quality caliber players on that back 7 would definitely be a high importance if I was running the team. So I could see a reason why they'd bring back Holcomb.
Nick, 3 years from now, will Terry still be the best receiver on the team, or will Dotson have outranked him on the depth chart?
No, it's always going to be Terry. It's always Terry for me. I was dead wrong about the Dotson pick. I watched him, and I think he had there were some moments where he kind of struggled against some press coverage, but he shined this year. I think he's an absolute stud. I think they nailed that pick, but Terry's elite. He's one of the top 15. You can make an argument for top 10 best wide receivers in the NFL. And Jahan Dotson is already very good, but I think it's always going to be Terry for me.
I asked you guys to put together your top 10 performers from this season. Ethan, we'll start with you at number 10.
So this was a little bit out of the realm, but both 10 and 9, I'll say 10 now, but both 10 and 9 were special teams guys. I thought Jeremy Reeves, he doesn't really play a lot of defensive snaps, but there's a reason he's voted Pro Bowl as a special teamer. He was on the Players Association's All-Pro team as a core special teamer. I don't want that to go unnoticed. He makes a big difference on all special teams. Logan Thomas was saying earlier in the year, people are doubling him on when Tressway's punting because he's such a good gunner and getting down there. He doesn't even always play gunner. He's doing punt protector at times too. So I'm putting him up there. I think he had a great season. He's a free agent after the year, but what a great story that is. And he had to crack my top 10.
It is. I love that. I'm a huge Jeremy Reeves fan, as anybody that follows along this show knows. What keeps him from getting on the field?
That's a great question. I think it's just depth, but he did play a lot when Cam Curl went down. Obviously, the defense wasn't as great, but I thought Jeremy Reeves showed some flashes at safety as well. You go back to 2020, he played pretty well coming in at the end of the year in that Tampa game and the few games before. So I would love to see him get more opportunities. I think he's more than capable of being at least a backup safety in this league, if not more. Obviously, he's proven to be a great special teamer this year. So I hope his story only gets better. Great guy too. So you root for guys like that.
Yeah, I'm a big Reeves fan. I think he's one of the smartest players on the team. He's not athletically up there with other guys in the safety room. But I think he's just one of the smartest guys. You don't see him make too many mistakes. And like Ethan said, I think he was more than adequate when he was playing safety. I think it was just kind of tough for Forrest to sort of transition to Curl's role. But no, I think Jeremy Reeves is a good shout at 10. I just didn't include special teamers.
No doubt.
Even though he did make PFF's All-Pro team. So there we go. There's another plus for PFF.
Aha. All right. Who do you have at 10, Nick?
I have Derek Forrest. Him kind of emerging really came out of nowhere. At times he was PFF's highest graded safety, or him and Cam Curl were. He did struggle when Crow went down, but I think when you kind of have the two of them back there, I think they're a really, really solid tandem.
I have Samuel here, who I think didn't probably get enough credit for the year he had, having to kind of play third fiddle at times. But from a pure talent standpoint, he does things that allow you to get real creative on offense. And I hope they find whoever comes in, I hope they find a bigger role for him next year. Let's see, Nick, at number 9, you have
Charles Leno, which is gonna anger some people because every time there's a sack, apparently it's always Charles Leno's fault. No, he's had some untimely sacks given up, but I think if you're looking at PFF grades, if you're looking at offensive linemen, scouts on Twitter, some of the best guys out there, they think Charles Leno is technique-wise one of the best in the NFL. Yes, there are some very untimely sacks, and for whatever reason, it's always him in some of the worst moments, which you can make an argument that's a problem, but I think he's a solid tackle. I don't think he's an elite tackle, but I think he's very solid, and any team would kind of be lucky to have him.
And our Walter Payton Man of the Year representative this year.
Also a great guy.
Great dude. Yep. Ethan, at 9, you have.
So I said I had 2 special teamers to start. This one's probably obvious then. Tress Way, another part of the game where I don't think, obviously he's a punter. Punters are people too. Doesn't get enough credit for all the different techniques he does with the football, pinning him inside the 20, inside the 10. Pro Bowler for a reason. Great dude. I mean, he flipped the field countless times in important games this year that for a team that wants to run the ball, control time of possession, and play sound defense, punting goes a long way. And I think there's definitely a few games where winning the field position battle was largely on him, and he deserves credit for it. I did have both Samuel and Leno as my honorable mention, though. So we are kind of on the same page there.
And second, I think, in kicks inside the 20 this year.
Yeah.
For Trustway. Big year.
Very well deserved.
At number 9, I have 52 here. Jamin Davis was getting ridiculed the first week, right? And getting called out and excoriated. He had to your point earlier, Ethan, I mean, to get the green dot and really take that role when a lot of people were very frustrated and upset at him. I think he showed you that he indeed can be a building block on that defense. Really had a great year starting to put it together. So Jamin Davis for me at number 9. Ethan, number 8 for you.
Nick just mentioned him, but Derek Forrest is who I had at number 8. Led this team in interceptions, came out of nowhere, played, I think, just 26 defensive snaps last year as a rookie. Changed his number to 22. Apparently, that's all it took for him to be a really solid safety. His growth was very impressive to watch. He was a turnover machine, like I said, huge hitter. He hits just strongly enough without getting a penalty, which I think is a very underrated skill to have. So him and Cam Curl, who's obviously later on my list, those two formed a really solid safety duo. And when they were on the field together, a lot of good things happened. Obviously, when Curl got hurt, things struggled a little bit. But Forrest is a stud, and I'm excited to see him and Curl next year, another year under their belt together.
I have Forrest here also. Interesting. Do you think McCain will be back? It was just a little bit, but Percy Butler to me looked pretty good in that last game, all things considering. I know they have high hopes for him. You think McCain is one of these cap casualties?
I don't think so. He signed, I think it was a 2-year, $11 million deal, so it's not necessarily a huge hit. Carson Wentz's contract's obviously going to be coming off the books, and McCain has that positional versatility that the coaching staff covets and loves. He can play all 5 defensive back positions. So I think that alone will keep him. Also another locker room leader. Guys look up to him, kind of the veteran in that DB's room as well.
Position flex. Nick, number 8 for you.
I had Brian Robinson. I know you guys might have him a little higher, but we at PFF absolutely despise running backs. So even just putting him at 8, hurt my soul a little bit. No, I think he's a very, very good running back. I think it was a decent draft pick again. 3rd round running backs aren't my favorite, but if you keep drafting the 3rd round running back every 3 or 4 years, I think you're going to be pretty well off with the running back position. I think he's just a very, very solid running back already. Even after coming off what happened to him in the offseason, I think it's a pretty incredible story, and already a very, very good running back.
I have Antonio Gibson here, who again, had a really great year. No fumbles, or rather, I guess he fumbled once. No fumbles lost this year, which was great to see for him. Almost 1,000 yards all purpose. Could have gotten a little higher. It's interesting when you brought up Brian Robinson, who, again, did all of that in 12 games. And just the fact that you could see once he got it started going a little bit, it totally changed what they were doing and obviously what they wanted to do. Ethan, who do you have here?
Number 7, I have Brian Robinson Jr. I like pretty much echoing everything you guys said about him. Great story, but he came back and he made an immediate impact completely. His presence completely shifted the offensive identity. I think next year when he has a full offseason, everything good to go, I think he's going to be a real driving force to this offense. And one area I'd like to see them use him a little bit more next year is as a pass catcher. I think when he was given that opportunity, he showed some flashes. He's a lot better in space than I envisioned. So I think this was a very good rookie year for him, all things considered. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of those guys that takes a year to jump we always talk about.
All right, Nick, who do you have next?
I had Jahan Dotson 7th for me.
Oh, wow.
And again, I think I was way off on the Chris Olave no matter what. Even though I think Olave might be a better wide receiver, I think he was a better wide receiver this year. I think when you trade down and can still get Jahan Dotson, who's already stepped in and become a great rookie wide receiver, I think 7 is a good spot for him.
Ethan, who do you have next?
I have Kendall Fuller at 6. I thought he had a really good back end of the year, like we touched on earlier. 2 pick sixes. Teams didn't really throw his way when St. Juice wasn't in there. And even when St. Juice wasn't there, they were throwing at him a lot more too. So he's one of those guys I think had a really good year. Doesn't get a lot of credit for how good of a year he had. And I'm here to give him the credit he deserves. So I'm putting him at number 6.
And I'm happy about that because really I was going back and looking at some of the games and you're right. I kept thinking that he was not good this year for some reason. And he really was very good. And maybe that's to your point. Maybe that's because we just didn't hear his name very much, which is probably a good thing because he also didn't get flagged very much.
No.
I mean, he really had a clean season. This is where I have Brian Robinson. Nick, who do you have?
I got Kendall Fuller here at 6 as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. Very good.
Yeah, I'm a big Kendall Fuller fan. Already talked about it. I think he's one of the best off-zone coverage corners that you can really have, and I think hopefully we can finally get a consistent 4 back there, so you don't have the slow start, and everyone kind of sees the slow start in the secondary and kind of writes off the rest of the year. But he was really good down the back half of the season.
Number 5 is where I have Cam Curl. Ethan, who do you have here?
I have Montez Sweat here. Like we talked about earlier, thought he had a really good year after maybe a little bit of a disappointing 2021 where he had that fractured jaw and then COVID missed a bunch of time. Thought he came back well. Obviously, a lot of off the field personal stuff he went through this year that is hard for any individual to go through. And I thought he did a great job dealing with all that, leading on his teammates, but also arguably turning in his best season to date. So very impressed with what I saw from him. And I'm really keeping a close eye next year to see if that's when he fully breaks out. I feel like we're close to that breakout year with Montez. We haven't had that full-on breakout just yet. So good year for him.
5 you have?
I had Montez Sweat as well. I guess we were just cheating off of each other. No, I think, like Ethan said, this was his career year so far. Again, I think he is a very, very solid edge rusher. I think he can do everything. I just, again, like you just said, was that next step is that elite pass rusher and consistently generating pressure and not just being, a great run defender, but, really kind of getting after the quarterback.
Number 4 is where I have Montez Sweat. You guys said it well enough. Ethan, who do you have here, number 4?
I have Deron Payne at number 4. Obviously, I wouldn't be surprised if our 5 through 1 or 6 through 1 are all the same.
Yeah.
I thought Payne, obviously, the numbers speak for themselves. Great year. I didn't put him above the guys that have ahead just because, one, I do think he benefits, even if it's ever so slightly, from playing next to Jonathan Allen. That's a guy who takes up double teams a lot and still performs at a very, very high level. I think there's a reason Allen was given the Pro Bowl nod over him, as good as Payne has been this year. So he's the reason I have him at 4. A great year. Just a few guys I think were a little bit better in some aspects.
Nick, I assume from your expression there that you have Deron Payne here.
Yep, Deron Payne as well, because those guys at PFFs just suck. Everyone hates him anyway. No, I like Ethan said. I think he's a very good defensive tackle. I think I'll take a long, hard look and try to weasel my way into the grading to kind of fix that. But yeah, no, I think he's a very, very solid defensive tackle.
Number 3 comes around is where I have Deron Payne at. So we'll tell him to work on his missed tackles so that PFF will bump him up a little bit.
Don't tell him anything about
PFF. Quite
PFF.
as hard.
Don't tell him anything about PFF. I'm scared of how he'll react.
Who do you have here at number 3, Nick?
I have Cam Curl here. I think Cam Curl outside of Terry, I think he's my favorite player. I just think he's so good. To get him in the 7th round, he's just not a perfect safety, but he's everything you can really ask for, and that he doesn't do anything bad. Like, he does everything good to well, if that makes sense. I think you can put him anywhere, you can line him up on anyone, and he's not going to make mistakes. He's going to know where he's supposed to be, and that's my favorite sort of player. So I'm a big Cam Curl fan. PFF is a big Cam Curl fan, so it's nice when it kind of matches up.
Ethan, do you think they will end up being able to work out an extension with him this offseason? Do you think they're going to try that, or they'll wait till next year?
They need to get ahead of it. We've seen them get ahead of it, of guys entering the last year of their deals. John Allen, 2021, Terry, 2022. Cam Curl's even a guy who's making less money than those guys were, being a 7th round pick. He might be the best value contract of anyone on this team, certainly, but even in the league. So surely hoping for the Commanders' sake, they work out a deal, because he's due for a massive pay raise.
Ethan, at number 3, you have?
I am putting John Allen there at 3. I think, obviously, Pro Bowler, 2nd year in a row, one of the best interior defensive tackles in the league. So many good things to say about John Allen. I think, obviously, I'll just say it now. I have Cam Curl at 2. I think seeing Cam Curl's absence in both the first 2 games of the year and then the San Francisco game and on the back end, it makes such a crystal clear difference when he's out on the field versus when he's not, that even the most casual fans know it's how big of an impact he makes. And when you pass the eye test, but also pass all of the stats and advanced analytics and stuff, you're a damn good player. And that's why I just put him a little bit higher than John Allen. I wish Cam Curl got a little bit more national respect, because I don't think he's quite there yet, but maybe one more year, and that's when he enters the conversation of being one of the elite safeties in this league.
Cam Curl, 2nd team All-Pro on PFF's list. Just saying, if everybody wants to hate us for the Deron Payne thing, they can love us for Cam Curl.
Nick, number 2 for you.
I have Jonathan Allen here. I think it was a bit of a step down from last year, where he was elite of the elite. I think he's still an elite defensive tackle, and I think he's a very, very good player. There's nothing you can really say bad about him. I think he has I think he has probably the most dominant pass rush move, the cross chop hump that people call it, where he's literally picking up 300-pound men and driving them into quarterbacks. It's one of the most impressive, and I think one of the most dominant moves in the NFL, and it's always fun to watch.
And Chris Baker continues to tell me he thinks that John still got another step to take. I
can see it. If you can get some people to rotate in behind him so he's not playing 90% of the snaps, I think you can definitely see it.
82% on the season for Deron Payne. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible that, I mean, John got injured there at the end, but it's incredible that either one of them made it that far playing that amount of snaps. I have John Allen at 2. Ethan, who do you have at 2? You already said, right? You have Curl.
Yeah.
Okay. And the best player on the season, Nick, you have
Carson Wentz, baby. No, of course it's Terry. It's always going to be Terry. I said last year, if they don't re-sign him, I'm done. I think I might be in the same boat with Cam Curl. If they don't re-sign him, I'm done. But no, I think Terry McLaurin is a top 15, easily top 15 wide receiver in the NFL. He's one of the elites, and the numbers he put up with the 8 different quarterbacks. We use the 8 different quarterback excuse for Turner. We use it in a positive for Terry, and it's incredible what he consistently does. It doesn't make any sense. I say it every single time. I don't understand how he doesn't have drop issues, but he catches the ball with his forearms and his chest, and it just doesn't make sense. But he is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL.
Never seen a guy as productive as Terry that is essentially a body catcher.
It's
But,
crazy. He will jump over people and catch it with his literal forearms and elbows, and it's honestly even more impressive than catching with your hands.
it's incredible. And Terry is who I've got at number one. 3,000 yard receiving years in a row. Only 77 receptions this year, and still got it. Playing with Carson, who for whatever reason refused to get him the ball. I'll never quite understand that one, since every other quarterback got it. Ethan, I think that leaves Terry for you as well, doesn't it?
Of course, yeah. Setting a career high in receiving yards with some of the worst quarterback play he's even had this year. There were so many games where he didn't even touch the ball until end of second quarter, early third quarter, and yet he still almost had 1,200 yards. One of the best contested catch receivers in the league, which is crazy because that was considered a weakness of his coming out in the draft. He seems to get better every single year, and this is the second year in a row the Commanders have signed someone to a long-term extension, and they have rewarded them with their best season to date. So hopefully Cam Curl can follow that trend. But I get more blown away watching Terry every single week. I know Nick said top 15. I'm going to say top 10.
Mm-hmm.
He was voted technically as a top 8 because he's one of the 4 Pro Bowl receivers from the NFC. So I know a lot of people try to put him a tier below the A.J. Browns, C.D. Lambs, and all those guys. But if Terry had anything close to that type of quarterback play, I would think he could come close to 13, 14, maybe 1,500 yards. So I hope
he should. If you're watching, he's wide open almost every single play. Yeah. And if you just have Heineke, that could find him, and you can get more yards if it wasn't underthrown and contested. He leads in contested because of his quarterback play, and it's all there. If you just look at the numbers and you're watching him, he's elite of the elite.
That last game, it was incredible how many times he threw throw it to me now. I've smoked him, I mean, at least 3-4 times with the hand motion alone. It's become incredible. Let one last one, and we'll wrap this thing up. We started the show, Nick, you said meh, which is extremely apropos at 8-1. I don't even know how you go 500 in a year that had an odd number of games. It's perfectly sums it up. But I would suggest that the team, Ron says they're heading in the right direction. I know you can't really head anywhere without a quarterback, but it feels like from a roster standpoint, they are heading in the right direction. Ethan, do you feel better now than you did when the season started?
Yes, but only to a certain degree. I think right now, until they find at least a serviceable, average, above average quarterback, their ceiling is only so high, which is 8-9 wins. And yes, Rivera made such a big deal about the year 3 jump, but even if they got into the postseason, they're not making it out of the first round. They'd be playing San Francisco, and even though they played them tough for 2 quarters, they got smoked in the second half. I like where the roster is right now. I like the young nucleus of guys they have, and I think they've done a good job of keeping their own and rewarding the guys that have stepped up and become some of the better players in the league. But until you get that quarterback play, your ceiling is only so high. And when your ceiling is only so high, unless you have an excellent roster from top to bottom with very few holes like the 49ers, you're not going to be among the elite teams in the NFL competing for a title. And when you're not in that group, things only go so far before turnover happens and you kind of rebuild from the bottom or the top down. So I like where they're going. I think they have a good group, but until they find that quarterback, you can't really expect anything more than maybe a wild card berth.
Nick, I'd ask you the same thing, but I think Ethan kind of summed it up perfectly. I'm not sure. I mean, I think that's probably that's how you feel the same way, right? We're just quick
selfishly
find a quarterback.
Yeah, selfishly, it just looks better for me because I nailed the Carson Wentz thing, and I'm in on a hot streak of nailing my quarterback takes recently with the Zach Wilson dilemma, and hopefully Sam Howell will hit. So maybe people should just start listening to me about quarterbacks more often.
Obviously. Fellas, geez, we're almost at an hour here, so I will let you guys go. Appreciate you giving me the time today.
Yeah,
appreciate you
having
me
as always.
Yeah.
All right, fellas, thanks.